Hi everyone, my name is Merna and welcome to Soul Struggles. We'll be discussing struggles that we face in our everyday lives and especially now during our current pandemic. Today we have Agaibi, who is a therapist with a master's and doctoral level training in counseling psychology and a focus in resilience. She works with children, adolescents, and adults. Thank you for being here, Christine.
Thank you for having me.
Today's topic is going to be When God is Silent, Grace, Calmness, and Psychological and Spiritual Self-Care for the New Year. Our first question is, this last year was difficult and there were many challenges. We are told to trust God's presence. So what does it mean when God is silent? Is God actually silent?
So this question is interesting because in the past year, I know a lot of people have prayed for a lot of different things, and we had outcomes that we didn't want that happened, and people lost jobs and people lost loved ones. And so when those kinds of things happen, we often question God, and we question, was God listening, or is he silent and not paying attention to our needs? And so we know that God reveals himself through lots of different things, through the Bible, through song, through hymns, through sermons sometimes. And listening is kind of a matter of perspective. Am I listening to the right things? And when something negative happens, does that mean that he's not listening? Is he not giving? Is he resisting? Of course, those things are not true. We have to know that God is still listening, and God is still present, and God is still there. And his attributes are still there. His attributes have not changed just because we're going through a difficult time. We're going through a very big struggle. His love, his grace, his goodness still remain. And so we have to listen and pay attention to the conversation. And we know that we sometimes put our limited understanding on things on God, who is limitless. And so we have to know that if a friend doesn't call us, for example, during a week or 2 weeks or something, it could be they're going through something is happening in their world. It doesn't mean that they don't care about us anymore. And so we put these limited attributes and thinking on situations that we don't understand. And we do the same thing with God. If he's not doing the outcome that we expect or the outcome that we want, to us that means he's not listening. But that's not true. And there's times in the Bible where he really waited a long time before responding and before coming up with a solution. So with Joseph, he waited 13 years in the prison and all that before he became the second in command in Egypt. Abraham waited 25 years from when he was made the promise that he would have his son until he actually had his son. Moses wandered the desert for 40 years. Jesus waited 30 years before starting his ministry. So if we're being made to wait, that's a common theme in the Bible. It doesn't mean that answers have to come right away. And sometimes we get more information and we get more patience and we get more understanding when we're made to wait. And so Job even said at the same time, Lord, answer me, Lord Almighty, answer me. And so this has happened again in the Bible where we are asking God to answer us and we don't know where the answers are going to come, but they do come. And eventually the answers do come. And of course, we know that Christ does listen to us and God listens to us. So it doesn't mean that his silence is going to be permanent, and it doesn't even mean that he's silent. He's waiting to respond in a way that we will understand in the right time, and so it doesn't always mean that he is silent.
Our next question is, what does God's silence mean?
Yeah, so God's silence sometimes means that we're either stuck in a pattern of something due to a natural consequence, due to sin, due to something that we have been doing. Sometimes the silence comes because we need to strengthen our faith in a certain area and be patient in a certain area. His silence is not permanent. And there's a verse that says, the Lord your God is in your midst, the mighty one he will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness. He will quiet you with his love. He will rejoice over you with singing. And that is in Zephaniah 3:17. So even if he's silent, he's always finding a way to give us compassion and kindness and support. And you will find people around you that you may feel like you're suffocating, but some certain situation will feel like a window has been opened up to give you kind of support in that difficult situation. So he will quiet you with his love and he will rejoice over you with singing, even when things seem to be times of struggle and times of stress.
What can we do when God is silent?
Yeah, so while we wait for a response, that doesn't mean that he's not acting, because he's always acting, he's always keeping us in his mind, but we can pray more. We can call out just like David the prophet did in the Psalms. during some of his most difficult times, those beautiful psalms came out of those difficult times. So in Psalm 28, David the prophet says, "To you, O Lord, I will call my rock, and be not deaf to me, lest if you be silent, I become like those who go down into the pit. Do not keep silence, O Lord, and do not hold your peace or be still, O God." That's in Psalm 83. "And I cry out to you for help, and you do not answer me. I stand, and you look at me," and that's in Job. So there's verses again from the Bible we can cry out to God. Those are opportunities to come from the darkness and see where we can find light, where we can find light to help others or others can help us. Opportunities to learn new ways to pray and to praise. Time to read more scripture, time to be more thankful. Again, even in the most darkest of times, there are small things even that we can be thankful for. And the Coptic Orthodox Thanksgiving prayer talks about this. Thanksgiving in all times, in all situations, and in all things. So even in the darkest and most difficult of times, even in funerals, that Thanksgiving prayer is read. And so there's always something to be thankful in God in everything, not just for everything. And we have to understand that sometimes suffering is a mystery. Sometimes we don't understand why things happen the way that they happen. In psychology, there's a concept of radical acceptance, that knowing that sometimes struggles are just a part of life, and the more that we're able to do this radical acceptance of whatever happens, then we can problem solve, then we can find solutions, then we can talk to others. So again, we have a limited perspective. We don't know all the steps. We don't know all the reasons. It sometimes acts like a mystery. But we know that sometimes, oftentimes, after tragedy, after difficulty, there's usually a light somewhere. And so searching for that light and having gratitude in any situation is important. And Job, again, he committed himself to transcending the physical pains of this world and wanted to commit to God. So even though he was going through a lot of difficulty, he maintained his faith. He wasn't confused by the people that tried to confuse him, his family and his friends. And he stood up and submitted to God's will and didn't hold any resentment towards God for the difficulty that he was going through. And we know that his life was redeemed and rewarded at the end of all of that difficulty. So again, while we're waiting for a response, it's important to remember who God's character is, and that his character is good, and that he has goodness all around him, and he is the epitome of good. And so it's important to remember that even though we're going through struggle. We go through struggle because we live in a fallen world that has struggles as part of it. But if we're patient, if we believe, if we understand God's good character, his faithfulness, his love, that he's different than people sometimes hurt each other, but God would never do that, then we know that he will stick by us through the struggle and will give us a purpose for our lives, even through the struggle. There's a lovely quote that was written on a wall at Auschwitz during the Holocaust by one of the people that were in those concentration camps, that I think is really fitting here. And it says, "I believe in the sun even when it's not shining. I believe in love even when I don't feel it. And I believe in God even when he is silent." So God is there present with us, even if he's not necessarily speaking as boldly as he always does, but he's present. His goodness and faithfulness are always there with us.
Our next question is, how can I discern God's will in that time?
Yeah, so don't ignore the silence. Usually don't avoid it. Don't run away from it. Don't run away from prayer and supplication and fasting and all of the things that we do when we are talking to God. We know that God is sovereign, and any problem, he is still sovereign. If there's any sin, we should confront it and acknowledge it in our life, not run away from it. Again, that approach coping that we talked about before, it's really important that we face our problems head on. If there's a giant elephant in the room, talk about that giant elephant. If there's a giant sin, confront it. Confront what is known in our lives, and that's the only way that we can make decisions that are appropriate and know where things are going wrong and how to fix them. We need to, again, trust God, that he's sovereign, that he's good, that he's kind, that he's loving, that he is always working towards our behalf. So that silence is not necessarily silent. Sometimes example with kids, they'll come and ask you, "I want this and I want that and I want this and I want that," and they don't get it right away. Sometimes they'll get it on a holiday or after they've passed a big exam. It doesn't mean that their parents weren't listening. It just, they're going to give them the response at the right time. So the silence is, maybe he's speaking intimately to us in a way that we will understand in a certain way. So notice those things and stay connected to him and stay close to him, and know that you have a purpose. And so sometimes we just have to roll with that silence until it is resolved, and know that he's working for us. If we're close to him, then we'll know the answer in due time.
Our last question is, how can I have psychological and spiritual self-care in that time?
Yeah, so self-care is really, really important. And oftentimes, like I said, we ignore our self-care, but we cannot pour out from an empty cup. It is really, really important that we have the self-care in all aspects of our life, physically, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, financially, personally, and in interpersonal relationships as well, professionally. So it's really important that we take care of self-care. Self-care is not selfish. People used to believe that self-care was selfish. If I'm taking care of me, that means I'm neglecting somebody else. But the saying goes is that we cannot pour out from an empty cup. So the more that we give sometimes, the more depleted we become. So we need to refill that cup so that we can pour out on others once again. We have to take care of our mind. We have to take care of our body. We have to take care not to get burned out. It's okay to take a week off here and there, especially during this pandemic when we've been challenged to our extent beyond our limits. So take some time off. Take some time to heal mentally. Take some time to reflect. Take some time to do some things that are purposeful and meaningful. Take time to journal. Take time to go walk in nature. Those things are all healing and can be really restorative and can connect us again spiritually. Because when we're feeling depleted, sometimes we don't even want to do the spiritual things. So in order to not be depleted, we have to refill ourselves. And self-care is not selfish. It is a necessity. It is not a luxury.
Thank you so much for being here, Christine.
Sure.
My name is Merna. Thank you for watching Soul Struggles, and we'll see you next time.